Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for waiting. Welcome. This is a special presentation of the Author's Guide to Choosing a Publishing Service. I'm Grail Norton, Wheatmark's Acquisitions Manager and a Senior Faculty Member of the Authors Academy. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. Now we've got a ton of great material to go over with together and not much time to cover it all in, so let's jump right in and get started. Now one quick note, if you have a question during the presentation, go ahead and type it into the box there at the bottom of your screen. If we have time, I'll address your questions live. Otherwise, I'll get back to you personally by email. Thanks. Now, choosing a publisher for your book isn't easy. Why? Because you're bombarded with misleading advertising, confusing claims, and simply bad information from lowest price service providers and high-pressure salespeople. It's pretty crowded out there, too. By our estimate, there are more than 100 companies of various sizes competing to offer publishing services to authors in North America alone. The once proud publishing industry, formerly dedicated to bringing great books by great writers to eager readers, is flooded with fly-by-night self-publishing companies that sell shoddy editing, poor book design, and nearly worthless book marketing services. Now the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The marketplace is flooded with books of laughable quality. Readers have a harder and harder time discovering great new books, and new authors have a harder and harder time breaking through the clutter and getting noticed. So how do you find a qualified, competent, and professional book publishing service? You start by watching this program. In this fact-filled presentation, you're going to discover the 3 methods of publishing, how to decide which method of publishing is right for you, 4 misused terms to ignore when researching how to publish, 5 costly misconceptions about publishing a book, 9 critical mistakes to avoid when choosing a publishing service, how to avoid the 3 biggest self-publishing company ripoffs, that's an important one, and we're also going to make a 100% guaranteed risk-free irresistible offer at the end of this presentation, so be sure to stick around until then. Okay, now we created this presentation to help you better understand the fast-changing world of publishing. Now, with the information we'll cover today, you can make an informed, intelligent decision. Now, before we go any further though, who the heck are we? Well, Wheatmark is a publishing services firm. We were one of the pioneers in the modern publishing services industry. We opened our doors in 1999, and since then we've published more than 1,500 titles by more than 1,000 author clients. Over the course of those dozen years in business, we've also counseled, coached, and trained countless authors about successful book publishing and effective book marketing. This presentation is the culmination of those years of hard-earned experience. Now, of course, a natural other question that you might be asking yourself is, who am I? Well, as you can see there, that's me. I'm Grail Norton. My previous experience in publishing was working for Photos Travel Guides, which is a division of Random House in New York. Later, in the mid-2000s, I self-published a series of ebooks. It's a project that some of you may have heard me discuss before, where I learned a lot of valuable lessons. And then, of course, currently I'm working at Wheatmark, doing publishing services and marketing training for author clients. So I've really had experience in all 3 areas of publishing that we're going to be talking about today: trade publishing, self-publishing, and publishing services. And if those terms aren't that familiar to you, don't worry about it, because we're actually going to spend the beginning of this presentation talking about just that. We're going to be talking about the 3 publishing methods, which are currently identified by their fruits. So anyway, number 1 is, before we can begin discussing the extraordinary opportunities and potential pitfalls of publishing in the 21st century, we just have to make sure we're on the same page about the different kinds of publishing and the terminology we use to talk about them. So in today's publishing landscape, there are essentially 3 ways to publish your book. And I'll go back to them just so you can see them. Get a traditional publishing deal by licensing the exclusive publishing rights to your manuscript. And we're doing that with an Apple for like New York, the Big Apple. Then self-publish your book, form your own publishing company, which is a pineapple. Not really sure why we chose a pineapple, but it just, why not? Let's go with it. And then number 3 is hire a publishing services company to publish your book for you, which we did as a little cocktail in pineapple because it's kind of a hybrid between the 2. Now, none of these 3 routes is the ideal path for every author. Each route to publication has its advantages as well as its disadvantages. So let's take a quick look at how to accomplish route number 1. Get a traditional publishing deal by licensing the exclusive publishing rights to your manuscript. Now, this route to publication is both the most straightforward and the most difficult. All you need to do is land an agent who specializes in your book genre. Some agents specialize in fiction, others in nonfiction. Often, agents will be even more specific, focusing on Western fiction or self-help books, for example. Now, how do you find an agent? Well, it's simple. You pick up the latest Guide to Literary Agents by Writer's Digest Books. Look for the agents in your niche or genre and query them. Now, I should just mention real quick that the Guide to Literary Agents also contains detailed info on writing an effective query letter. But you can also note that on the slide that I say don't waste your time on this, and I don't mean don't do it at all, I just mean don't spend years and years and years chasing this. And why? Well, the reason this route is so difficult is because trade publishing houses only license the exclusive publishing rights to a tiny percentage of the manuscripts that are submitted to them each year by agents or authors. Most sources put the exact figure at less than 1%. And the reason these publishing houses license the exclusive publishing rights to so few manuscripts is because they lose money on 9 out of 10 titles they publish. It's a pretty shocking figure if you think about it. Now, a great many authors begin their publishing quest by exploring the traditional route to publication before seeking an alternative. However, most authors are better off skipping this step entirely because in the vast majority of cases, it's simply a waste of time. Again, the reason is because most authors will end up landing an agent through a personal connection, which can take a lot of time to develop, 6 months, a year, 2 years, or even longer. So maybe people you meet at a writer's conference or in a workshop or something like that might be able to refer you to their agent. So these days, the year or two you might spend looking for an agent and then having that agent shop your manuscript to publishing houses in hopes of landing a deal is much better spent simply publishing your book yourself or with the help of a publishing services company. That way, you can get on with building an audience for your work, which should be your primary objective anyway. Now, another potential drawback of licensing the exclusive publication rights to your work is losing control over your content and potentially over your audience. In a rights licensing deal, your publisher will control your book, your content, and your audience, not you. But again, your ultimate goal as an author should be to build an audience of readers with whom you have a direct, ongoing relationship. If you license the exclusive publishing rights to your work, who owns the relationship that sales of your book will foster? Think about it. The publisher has a relationship with the bookstore, that's its customer, and the bookstore has a relationship with its customers, your readers. So where does that leave you, the author? In many cases, nowhere, with no customers of your own. What you want to do is avoid the doomsday scenarios where your publisher decides to delay your book's publication, sometimes for years even, or unceremoniously dumps it on the market with little or no promotion. And anybody who's on the call who's been published by a trade publisher may have unfortunately experienced this because it happens all the time, and so it just kills your career. There are very, very few circumstances where you want to give someone else this much power over your career as an author. Fortunately, these days, you don't have to. And I see that there's a bunch of questions coming in now, and I'll go ahead and okay, Larry's saying, I'm listening to this for my husband. I can't take notes fast enough. Or I guess Larry's the gentleman who she's listening for. How can I copy this stuff? I know that I'm speaking quickly, but we've got a lot of material to cover. So we'll see if we can get you this information some other way. And Sean, we'll look at your question later at the end of the call. All right, so now let's turn to the second route to publication, which is self-publish your book or form your own publishing company. Now, make no mistake, not everyone is cut out to publish their own book. It's a lot of work, and there's a steep learning curve. First, you'll need to set up your own publishing company, which includes organizing your company, hiring editors, designers, and other production people, publishing your book, and selling your book. Now, you'll be responsible for all the creative activities, which are fun, but also all the business activities, a lot less fun, such as buying a block of ISBNs, which is an International Standard Book Number, setting up distribution, and of course, shipping books to retailers. Now, you may choose to hire a company or companies to do some of these tasks for you, or you may handle every last detail yourself. Now, there are some decided advantages to self-publishing. Here are a few of the advantages of forming your own publishing company, which may or may not include hiring a publishing services company to do some or all of the necessary activities for you. You've got complete control over your book's content, complete control over your book's layout and design, a faster publishing timeline, equal access to online sales channels, and a higher royalty or percentage of sale on each book sold. But here are a few of the disadvantages. You assume the financial risk. You need to make informed decisions to be successful. You're responsible for generating your sales yourself. And you have limited access to the physical bookstore market. So those are some of the disadvantages. But another factor to consider is your time. If you start your own company, be prepared to put as many hours into your publishing project as you would into a nearly full-time job. Moreover, you won't be spending all your time doing the most important activities you should be doing as an author. And we'll explain what those are later in this presentation, which is why we don't recommend this route to most authors, and in particular to first-time authors. Now, I remember this from my own self-publishing days. Here's the ultimate warning about self-publishing, and by that, again, we mean doing everything on your own. So we're talking about forming your own publishing company, not working with a publishing service. While the creative part of the project can be fun and liberating, that's only one small part of the publishing process. The business side of things is where all the money is made or lost. And unfortunately, writing a book does not qualify you to handle the business side of things. The skills required to put a pen to paper are very different from those required to run a business, much less a profitable business. Marketing, sales, distribution, customer service, accounting, etc. Many authors jump into self-publishing with little thought given to this critical point. Now recall that traditional publishers are finding it very hard to make money these days, and most independent bookstores are struggling. Even large bookstore chains are declaring bankruptcy and going out of business. So how do you plan to do better than these traditional professional publishing players? If you don't have a ready answer, consider the third route to publishing, and that is to hire a publishing services company to publish your book for you. Now let's talk about what we mean by a publishing service. Essentially, publishing services companies aggregate all the services noted in number 2 above for their author clients. A single investment ranging from a few $100s to tens of thousands of dollars gets you a published book. Now this third publication route is frequently referred to as hiring a self-publishing company, but this is a bit of a misnomer, as in just about every single case, the publishing service company owns the ISBN, which makes that company the publisher of record. So technically you are not, quote, self-publishing. Now this is neither an inherently bad nor an inherently good thing, but again, it's worth clarifying so that we're all on the same page. Now there are as many variations of publishing services companies as there are flavors of ice cream at your local supermarket. Each has its own plans, pricing, and business models. Now one way to make some headway on this decision is to start by working on a budget, both in time and money, for publishing your book. Be both honest with yourself about what you can afford and realistic about what you can accomplish with different budgets. Today you can publish a book for $0, or you can publish a book for $1,000, $10,000, even $100,000. Now, generally speaking, you get what you pay for. A realistic budget for properly publishing most books, and by that we mean including solid editing and proofreading, an eye-catching cover, and strong interior layout, is between $3,500 and $5,000. And again, that's what I would say for a full service. So some people might work with their own editors. That means that your investment might be less, but that's a very good estimate for full service publishing. Now, books that fall on the low end of the design time scale, which in other words is the amount of time it takes a designer to do the interior layout and cover design, like novels, will be closer to $3,500. Books that are design heavy, like business books with lots of charts and graphs, or textbook type projects with lots of images, will generally fall into the higher range of $5,000 to $10,000. Now let's talk about some publishing service drawbacks. You give up some money on each book sold. Your cost for copies of your own book, of course, is generally higher, and sub-publishing services companies have terrible contracts. So those are some of the negatives. But here are some of the advantages of working with a publishing services company to do some or all the necessary publishing activities for you. You get access to a one-stop shop of services, including in many cases editing, layout and design, publishing, printing, wholesaling, order fulfillment, royalties management, etc. A single point of contact should any problems arise during the publishing process, and they pretty much always do. And someone else manages the business relationship with wholesalers, like Ingram, and retailers, like Amazon, for you. And if you don't know what a wholesaler is, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So ultimately, how do you decide if self-publishing or working with a publishing services firm is right for you? All it takes is the answer to 3 simple questions. Do I know who my book's market is? Do I know how to reach those readers? So do you know where they are? How are you going to reach them? Amazon? Are you going to work, bookstores? How are you going to reach those readers? And then number 3, can I afford both in time and money to reach those readers when my book is published? If you can answer yes to all 3 of these questions, then you should feel comfortable working with a publishing services firm to publish your book. So let's talk about how to decide which method of publishing is right for you. If prestige is the most important thing to you, and control of your book's content, design, and distribution is not, then the first publishing option, licensing the publishing rights to a trade publisher, is right for you. Now, a word of caution. Don't chase a trade publishing deal because you don't want to be involved in marketing your work, and instead want your publisher to market your book for you. The vast majority of rights licensing publishers are only interested in authors who have a sizable existing platform and big plans to market their books. Those trade publishers don't like gambling on the unknown and usually won't. Moreover, they will never gamble on the lazy. Now, if total control over every aspect of the publishing process, including managing the back end of the business, is the most important thing to you, then self-publishing by forming your own publishing company is the right route to take. A second word of caution, though, you need to start learning as much about the business of publishing, as soon as possible. And a good resource for getting started is www.selfpublishing.com. So if you're looking to start your own publishing company, selfpublishing.com is a fantastic resource. Now, if what you want to focus on is writing and marketing, and this is exactly what the vast majority of authors looking to develop careers should focus on, then working with a publishing services company is the best way for you to publish, particularly if you're a first-time author. Again, it's because it's going to cut the learning curve for you dramatically in terms of getting your business off the ground. But a third word of caution. Most publishing services companies are perfectly adequate for someone publishing a non-commercial project, such as a family memoir. However, many of these same companies are a liability when it comes to a project with commercial aspirations. And in some cases, working with these subpar companies can actually seriously damage your career. So the remainder of this presentation today will focus mainly on helping you select a publishing service company that will assist you with publishing properly so that you can build a lasting career as an author. The kind of company that will be an asset to you in your books, not a liability. Now, before we get into that, though, let's talk very quickly about 4 misused terms to ignore when researching how to publish. Now, probably a lot of people on the call right now are doing research about how to publish their books, and I'm sure you're likely to come across some terms that confuse you during that research, that are unclear, or that you see used in different ways by different sources. So here are some publishing terms to take with a giant grain of salt. Number 1 is traditional publisher. If you come across a company that identifies itself as a traditional publisher, it probably isn't. Random House, where I used to work, and the other big 6 publishers, and now there's 7 of them because Amazon got into the game, these big 6 publishers never refer to themselves as, quote, traditional publishers. There's usually some sort of catch, or the company wouldn't market itself this way. Publish America fits this category. Publish America makes its money by selling its authors copies of their own books at a significant premium. Now, while we don't have a problem with companies offering book publishing services to authors in any way they see fit, because it's a free country after all, mischaracterizing what business they're in is a different matter. So proceed at your own risk. Number 2 is subsidy press, co-publishing, or indie publishing. A subsidy press provides publishing services to authors. The same is true with a co-publishing or an indie publishing company, which is the nomenclature of choice for Author Solutions and its brands, including Author House, iUniverse, Trafford Publishing, Ex Libris, and its white label brands Westbow Press, Balboa Press, Abbott Press, and Delart Press. And there's probably about 20 more by now. Author Solutions runs these latter companies and splits the profits with their trade publishing parents. Ultimately, it's important to bottom line these companies for what they are, companies that provide publishing services to authors. Now, don't be fooled by claims of association either. Working with one of Author Solutions' white-labeled companies that they partner with a trade publisher for does not in any way improve your odds of getting a traditional publishing deal. These trade companies are doing it for money, period. Remember, they're losing money on 9 out of 10 titles. They need this money. They see an opportunity, and Author Solutions is glad to provide it for them. But the fact that you're somehow going to get a trade publishing deal by publishing with these people is ludicrous, and I think it's a dangerous association. Many people in publishing agree. Number 3, and this is probably the most popular of all, POD publisher. There's really no such thing as a POD publisher. POD, or print on demand, is a combination of printing and fulfillment technologies, and publishing services companies do not have a monopoly on their use. Major trade publishers, publishing services companies, and self-publishing authors all use this technology to their benefit when appropriate. In fact, if this label was accurate, Simon & Schuster would be the largest POD publisher in the world. So just ignore that label, it doesn't mean anything. And number 4 is vanity press. This term is used almost exclusively in a derogatory sense by people who claim that no one can be successful working with a publishing services company, despite plenty of evidence to the contrary. Now, you should ignore this label because the person using it almost always has an agenda that is unrelated or even in opposition to your agenda, which is getting copies of your book sold and building your career as an author. In every other case, their agenda is to sell you something. So just take it with a grain of salt. You know, there's nothing wrong with self-publishing. There's nothing wrong with working with a publishing service, as long as you're making this choice. You know, you understand what you're doing. You know, don't let people intimidate you by telling you that you're doing something bad. But again, you're educating yourself by attending this call, so you're going to know a ton of stuff so you can make an informed decision. All right, now I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and then we're going to move on because we got a lot to do. All right, thanks guys. Now, let's talk about 5 costly misconceptions about publishing a book. These are some doozies right here. Now, the following 5 misconceptions can cause you massive and potentially expensive headaches over the course of your publishing project. Costly misconception number 1 is that book publishing is the same as book printing. Now, one of the most basic conceptions about publishing a book is that the activity is synonymous with printing a book. Actually, printing is just one of the steps in book publishing. Now, before printing comes market analysis, editorial review, editing, interior design and layout, proofreading, cover design and layout, ISBN assignation, LCCN assignment, and a whole host of other activities. This is true of any book you hope to sell in a competitive environment, such as your local bookstore or online bookstores like Amazon.com. Now, not only is printing a book one of the last steps in the publishing process, but can also be one of the least complicated. And while printing is certainly important, it is by no means the one part of the publishing process that makes or breaks a publishing success. And yet, many authors base their entire publishing decision on this step. They spend most of their time comparing print prices and methods, digital versus offset, 1,000 copies versus 5,000, when in fact, they've missed or skipped some very, very important steps in the process. Steps that often separate the books that become publishing successes from the thousands and thousands of failures published every year. That said, knowing about the different kinds of printing can give you some insight into some of the potential pitfalls of publishing and help ensure that your project becomes one of the few standouts. So here are some quick and dirty definitions about printing processes. Number 1 is offset printing, and this is printing using older film-to-plate technology. Usually you'll need to print at least 2,000 copies of your book to make this method of printing cost-effective. Digital printing is number 2. In this scenario, copies of your book are printed using newer digital file-to-plate technology. Print runs can be smaller, even a single copy at a time. And number 3 is print on demand. Now, this isn't really a printing technology, but it's very important, and we've already discussed a little bit. This technology combines digital printing with automatic order fulfillment so that books can be printed, packed, and shipped as needed via an automated system. This technology has revolutionized the publishing services industry by making it much easier and much more cost-effective for authors to get their work in print, which is why there's hundreds of companies now. Now, today, many authors use publishing services companies to publish their books, as we just mentioned. It's so much cheaper now than in the old days, when self-publishing authors would be forced to invest thousands of dollars in a print run while not having meaningful distribution in place. Today's independent author doesn't need to spend all that money on printing, so many don't. But this is also where it all goes so terribly wrong for many of today's authors. Perhaps because they don't have to invest thousands of dollars in printing, many authors underfund their project. They publish subpar books that are unedited or poorly edited, with little thought given to the design or functionality of their books. This casual attitude about quality is fatal to a project with commercial aspirations. The same is true with an ebook, in which case there may be no physical copies of the book printed at the title's launch at all. Now, many people take this as permission to just upload an unedited Microsoft Word file to Amazon. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. After all, do ebook readers care less about the quality of what they're reading than print readers do, just because they're not reading a physical book? Of course not. Both types of readers expect the content they buy from an author to be of top quality, or they won't buy a book from that author again. So to summarize, while printing a book is cheaper and easier than ever, by using digital or POD technology, for example, properly publishing a book still costs money. For a commercial project, you need professional editors and designers. And then, of course, even a good ebook costs money to publish. So here's a quick insider's tip for everybody. Even if you plan to use print-on-demand technology to print your book, pretend that you're about to invest an additional $10,000 in a large print run of 5,000 copies. That should put you in the right mindset to ensure that you publish a high-quality book that's been professionally edited and designed. Just pretend it's going to cost you $10,000 more. That should help a lot. Okay, so costly misconception number 2. It's a good idea to print a large number of books when you publish, because that way you'll make more money per sale. Now this is closely related to costly misconception number 1, that book publishing is the same as book printing. It's understandable that for many authors, the per unit print cost of their books is a top concern when choosing a publishing services company. After all, the difference between your print costs and what you sell your book for represents your gross profit, and the greater that is, the fewer copies of your book you need to sell to break even. But here's an insight that, while may surprise you, will serve you well in your publishing project. Forget about breaking even, at least at the beginning. If you're going to properly publish a well-designed, well-edited, high-quality book simply for your friends and family, you're not going to break even. And if you're publishing a book with commercial aspirations, i.e. you hope to sell thousands or possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of copies, then you need to invest the amount of money necessary to create a book that has the potential to compete with books published by trade publishers. A book that has the potential to sell thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of copies, not just a few hundred. Now here's a quick analogy. When you see the previews for a new movie at your local Cineplex, do you imagine that the film's producers are sitting around in Hollywood thinking, gee, I really hope we break even on this one? Of course not. They're hoping to make money hand over fist. And they've invested in the creation and marketing of the film to make that happen too. Now the same is true for your book. You need to invest whatever's necessary to get the highest possible quality product, within reason of course, before even a single copy is printed. Then launch your new book with POD technology or an ebook and see how it's received. You may discover all kinds of wrinkles you never considered during the publishing process, the worst being that you haven't properly identified the market for your book. What you ultimately want to avoid is the independent publisher's worst nightmare. 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 copies of your book sitting around collecting dust in the garage where you used to park your car. Don't let that be you. The only exception to this rule is if you have a pre-sale commitment from a buyer or buyers for an agreed upon amount of money and the check has cleared the bank. That's a really important part there. So to summarize, printing a bunch of books without first test marketing your product is a fabulous way to lose a lot of money, and for no good reason. And here's a quick insider, again, here's another insider's tip. Forget about breaking even. No one hits a home run in any business by bunting. Invest what is necessary to create a top quality book. Having a high quality book is some of the best insurance you can buy to make your publishing project a success. Alright, now here's costly misconception number 3. Book wholesaling is the same as book distribution. Now this is a critical distinction that escapes many first-time authors, mostly because publishing services companies do a really poor job of educating them about it. A book wholesaler is a company that wholesales titles, usually by stocking them, so that retailers such as Amazon.com, your local independent bookstore, your town's Barnes & Noble, or your local university's college bookstore can order any book they want from a single source. Book wholesaling is a matter of efficiency. A wholesaler is a one-stop shop for bookstores. In North America, Ingram Book Company and Baker & Taylor are two of the largest and most prominent book wholesalers. In the UK, Bertram is a popular book wholesaler. Now, a book wholesaler doesn't do anything to encourage bookstores to actually order copies of your book. That's the job of a book distributor. A book distributor usually employs salespeople who call on the book buyers from chain and independent bookstores and pitch their catalog of titles. In exchange, the book distributor takes a percentage of sales from any title it sells. Distributors provide one-stop selling for publishers, in effect. So it's one-stop selling. In exchange for this convenience, distributors usually require the exclusive right to sell a publisher's titles. The publisher can't sell its titles separately on its own, too. So why doesn't every book get connected with a book distributor? After all, aren't these the people who sell books to bookstores? Well, yes, except that these aren't the people who market to readers to get them to go to the bookstores to buy your book. That job, which is increasingly the responsibility of the author, can require money, and sometimes a lot of it. So to summarize, wholesaling makes your book available to be sold. Distribution is a function of selling your title to bookstores, but not to readers. And just a quick insider's tip again, generally speaking, you do not need to work with a book distributor to get your book listed on online bookselling sites like Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Wholesaling is adequate for this purpose. Alright, let's turn to costly misconception number 4. Publishing a book will make you famous. Now let's be honest, when you first publish your book, you will be proud, and you should be. Not everyone has accomplished what you have. That said, a quick look at Amazon.com should help shatter the myth that publishing a book will make you famous. As of this writing, there are more than 8 million books for sale on Amazon, and you've never heard of the vast majority of their authors. These days, just getting published isn't what separates a successful title from an unsuccessful title. Good marketing is. Now, marketing has always been a bit of a controversial topic amongst authors. Today's publishing marketplace makes the reality clear, though. It is absolutely critical to understand, before you publish your book, that your publisher will not be the primary driver of the marketing and sales efforts for your book, even if your publisher uses a distributor. You will be. It doesn't matter if you license the publishing rights to your work to a trade publisher, self-publish, or work with a reliable publishing service. You will be the primary factor driving the sales of your book. Now, many authors respond to this reality by purchasing marketing services offered by publishing services companies. But be wary of hiring other people to market your book for you until you understand the result you can expect from those particular marketing activities. Many authors spend thousands of dollars on vendors for marketing services, only to be disappointed when they sell few books, if any. In many cases, this isn't even the marketing vendor's fault, although they didn't do a very good job educating, in my opinion, but they may have done exactly what they promised to do. The fault lies instead with the author, who didn't understand what outcome they could reasonably expect from the marketing activity in the first place. Now, the best antidote to this disappointment is to start investing in your own marketing education. You can pick up books about book marketing at your local bookstore or library. If you take the time to educate yourself about effective book marketing, you'll learn what's possible to do yourself. Then, if you need a vendor's help, you'll understand what you're buying and what you can reasonably expect the outcome to be. And another good resource to check out is the Authors Academy, and that's Wheatmark's training system for training authors about effective book marketing. You can learn more about the Authors Academy by visiting authorsacademy.com. So to summarize, just because you publish it doesn't mean anyone will buy it, and good marketing is what sells books and can eventually make you famous. And of course, check out www.authorsacademy.com/authors for more about the Authors Academy and effective book marketing. And here's just another insider's tip. Good marketing isn't like gambling. You don't just place your bet and pray. Take the time to learn about effective marketing, and the payoff in increased book sales will be enormous. This never fails. This is foolproof advice. All right, let's turn to costly misconception number 5. Publishing a book will make you rich. Now, this goes hand in hand with costly misconception number 4, that publishing a book will make you famous. The truth is, it's very, very hard to get rich selling books. Most authors with trade publishing contracts are thrilled to get a $10,000 advance against royalties these days, if they get an advance at all. Once they earn out their advance by selling enough books to cover the advance the publisher paid them, they might make $1 more in royalties for every additional book sold. Meanwhile, authors who publish with publishing services companies may make 2 or 3 times as much per sale, $2, $3, or even $4 a book, and authors who self-publish, form their own publishing companies again, may make even twice as much as that on each sale. But even if you somehow manage to make $10 on every book you sell, you'll need to sell 5,000 copies of your book per year just to gross $50,000 and make a modest middle-class living. Yet many of the most successful trade-published authors we know top out at 10,000 copies sold per title, period. They're certainly not making a living from their book sales. Then there are the independent authors. Wheatmark's own sales recognition program, called Great Expectations, formally recognizes our clients' sales achievements at 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies, and 5,000 copies sold. Those aren't easy sales figures to hit. According to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, the average title from a publishing service sells less than 200 copies. It's safe to say that publishing a book is not a good plan for getting rich. But while publishing a book or books is not a great way to make money on its own, publishing can be a significant part of building lasting wealth. And again, I'm going to refer you to the Authors Academy. If you'd like to learn more about making money through publishing, check out the presentation, How Authors Really Make Money, in the 4-webinar series, Secrets of Highly Paid, Highly Successful Authors, at www.authorsacademy.com. So to summarize, there are much easier ways to get rich selling books. Probably even buying lottery tickets is an easier way. Insider's tip, the economics of selling ebooks can be easier to manage than their print counterparts. You might want to consider publishing an ebook-only version of your book first to test the market, then move into print. But don't ignore the importance of investing in professional editing and design, as noted before. Even electronically, publish properly. Okay, now let's turn to 9 critical mistakes to avoid when choosing a publishing service. Now for this section of the Author's Guide, we're going to assume that you want to publish a book that competes with other titles already for sale in the marketplace. Anybody who doesn't care about competing with other books in the marketplace can just sign off the call now. They don't need to watch this. Now we're not going to assume you want to sell 1 million copies, but we are going to assume that you'd like to sell at least 2,000, 5,000, or 10,000 copies to start with. By the standards of the publishing services industry, that would make your book a big success. By the standards of a trade publisher, 10,000 copies sold would probably put you in the game for a publishing deal for your next book, if you wanted one. So now that we've defined the rules of engagement, let's check out the 9 critical mistakes to avoid when choosing a publishing service. Number 1 is taking advice from unqualified amateurs. Now I shouldn't even have to say this. It could just as easily be entitled, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." While it's a good idea to study a variety of resources before you publish your book, it's important to consider the sources of information you find, as well as the degree of experience of the people who offer it, when you decide who to work with. People have a bad habit of believing the first opinion they come across, regardless of whether or not it's a qualified opinion from someone with deep experience in the subject. But as you begin your publishing quest, some people will give you inaccurate or self-serving information. Others will mislead you, while still others will use your relative ignorance to outright steal from you. Here are the 5 types of people whose opinions you should totally ignore when it comes to making a decision about how to publish your book. Number 1 is Commission Chris. Now, popular at some of the big publishing services companies, Commission Chris is the sort of person who's been on the job only a few months and knows next to nothing about how to publish a successful book. Commission Chris's only goal is to get you to sign on the dotted line so he can make his commission, pay his bills, and move on to the next prospect. His only point of leverage is to discount the price of his company's package. All that a discounted price indicates is that the service wasn't worth the full retail price in the first place. Now the next one is Unpublished Uli. Uli wants more than anything to land an agent who can license the publishing rights to his work to a publisher. He spends his days attending writers' conferences and trolling on message boards, expressing his outrage at the publishing services industry and repeating inanities like money should flow to the author. In some cases, Uli even has a publishing deal, but his disappointment at the lack of support he gets from his publisher causes him to lash out at enemies real and imagined. He doesn't give credit where credit is due to an author who puts her money where her mouth is and goes out and makes her publishing project a success herself, either by self-publishing or by working with a high-quality publishing services firm. Now the next character is One Book Wanda. Wanda went into the publishing business after publishing her first book on CreateSpace or Lulu. The cost of working with these companies is low, but the technical know-how required to do a halfway decent job is quite high, so she spots a business opportunity and hangs out her shingle. However, simple technical know-how with template cover design generators does not a successful publishing project make. Unless Wanda's first book sold 10,000 copies, she likely has less knowledge about how to publish a successful book than you do if you've made it this far in this presentation. Now the next character is Indie Ida. Ida believes in the DIY ethic to a fault. She grows all her own food and can't imagine why an author wouldn't want to handle every last detail of their publishing project themselves. Well, some people like to grow their own food, some people like to shop at the grocery store and cook, and still others like to eat at restaurants. The same is true with publishing services. Not everyone wants to start their own publishing company, and by no means should everyone do it. In fact, the vast majority of authors are much better off not starting their own company, especially at the beginning of their publishing careers. So to complete the analogy, imagine eating dinner at a nice restaurant. Now imagine running the restaurant. That's the difference we're discussing here. Now the worst character of all is Predatory Pete. Predatory Pete feeds on the dreams of authors and exploits them at every opportunity. He engages in shady business practices such as connecting an author with an agent, only to have that agent request an upfront, quote, reading fee. Now, let me just tell you, no legitimate agent requires a reading fee. That's not how they work. They get paid when they sell your book. Predatory Pete changes the name and location of his company frequently, as he's often only one step ahead of the law. So let's all avoid him at all costs. Just be careful out there. All right, now let's turn to critical mistake number 2, hiring unqualified amateurs to publish your book. And so I picked a picture of unqualified amateurs as the Kardashians. I'm sure some people love the Kardashians, so my apologies. But many people feel like they're famous for being famous and they don't have any talent. I'll leave it up to you to decide. But anyway, this one's just sad. The number of books we've come across over the years that were poorly published by amateurs, usually by the authors themselves, but sometimes by people claiming to be professional publishing services companies, is shocking. All you have to do is look at the covers and interiors of a few of the books a company has published. If they don't look pretty much like the books you see for sale at your local bookstore, find a different company to work with. Don't wait to learn from booksellers or your readers that your book is subpar. That's too late. Now here's critical mistake number 3. Not checking out this company or whatever company you're exploring, at least what their customers say about them on the internet. Now this is truly the internet age, so there's no longer any excuse for doing business with unscrupulous characters. At the very least, check out the companies you're interested in with the Better Business Bureau, which you can find at www.bbb.org. Now, it doesn't hurt to do a search of just one quick note. A company doesn't have to be accredited with the BBB. All that means is they paid the BBB to review their company. It doesn't mean anything. What you're looking for is to see if they have lots of complaints. It also doesn't hurt to do a Google search of the company's name combined with the word complaints too, just to see what pops up. Now, if there are dozens or even hundreds of complaints, you might want to take that into consideration, especially if you read a bunch of the complaints and they seem reasonable. But I'm going to give you guys 2 notes of caution. First, some people just can't be satisfied. If you own a business or work with customers in any capacity, you're probably already familiar with this. Some customers complain about anything and everything, so their complaints should be taken with a grain of salt. Now second, some people have completely unrealistic expectations about publishing. In most cases, because they didn't bother to educate themselves by attending a presentation like this one, or reading Self-Publishing for Dummies, or other educational books and materials of this kind. It's pretty easy to tell if a complaint comes from someone who didn't understand what they were doing in the first place when they hired a company to publish their book for them. At worst, the publishing services company did a poor job educating its prospective customers about what they could expect when working with them. Now, fortunately, after watching this presentation, this is absolutely not going to happen to you. Number 4 is choosing a publishing service based mainly on price, not on value. Now, this one is a biggie. As consumers, it's natural for us to take price into consideration when making a buying decision. After all, most of the products and services we buy seem like they're easy to compare. A plumber is a plumber is a plumber. You hire a plumber to fix the leaky faucet. Now, I'd argue that isn't really the case. A good plumber is worth her weight in gold, while a bad plumber can cause you enormous headaches and expense. You can pretty much throw this idea out entirely when it comes to publishing services. Why? Because when you choose a publishing services provider, you aren't just choosing a business partner. You're counting on that business partner to help make your project a success. Publishing a book isn't the same kind of service as trimming your lawn, cleaning your house, or fixing your plumbing. It's much more akin to buying into a franchise that hopefully helps you sell thousands of books. Now, for example, every year thousands of people buy into, or not thousands, but hundreds of people or dozens of people buy into a McDonald's or a Subway franchise to get into the restaurant business. They do so because these franchises are a proven system for making money. What you get when you publish your book with your publishing service is help with creating your product, that's like your sandwich or hamburger, along with back-end support similar to what the parent company offers to a franchisee. In our example, McDonald's or Subway. Obviously, the goal in this system is for the franchisee to sell enough hamburgers or sandwiches not only to make a return on their investment, but to make a yearly profit as well. Meanwhile, the more profit the franchisee makes, the more profit the franchisor, the parent company, makes, so the parent company has a strong incentive to see its franchisees succeed. If you buy a Subway franchise, Subway wants you to succeed. In publishing services, that means selling books. But this requires specialized knowledge about publishing and marketing that takes years to acquire. Shockingly few of the publishing services companies you'll find on the internet know anything at all about selling books to readers. All you have to do is ask them how many copies of the average title they publish sells, and you'll witness the depth of their expertise or lack of it. Their actual expertise is in selling expensive, useless marketing services to authors that don't result in readers actually buying their books. However, ultimately responsibility falls on the shoulders of authors like us. Many authors out there act like they're buying a $500 lottery ticket when they publish a book with a low-cost publishing services provider. Hey, they figure, I only spent $500, so the worst that can happen is I'll lose $500. And in 99% of cases, that is exactly what happens. Except that in many cases, you've blown $500 and damaged your reputation. While price should be a factor when choosing a publishing services company, don't make it your primary consideration. You're setting yourself up to fail in advance. All right. Critical mistake number 5 is choosing a publishing service based on royalty percentages, 100%, 20%, etc. Now, first off, keep your eyes peeled for false or misleading claims when it comes to royalties, which is really more accurately identified as a percentage of sales when you're working with publishing services. Some publishers claim to pay a 100% royalty, but this is meaningless until you check their actual sales numbers. Publishers calculate their royalty rates based on different factors, so your best course of action is to simply ask for real net numbers. How much in actual dollars will you make on each sale? Now that said, there's a real danger of giving this factor too much weight when choosing a publishing service. This goes back to the apples to apples comparison we mentioned above, which was really a plumber to plumber comparison. In other words, that they're all the same. Many authors request information from a number of publishing services companies and then create charts so that they can compare things like royalty rates. Some publishing services companies even do this work for consumers by creating charts that compile these figures and posting them on their website or in a book they publish. Besides the fact that the information these sources provide is often inaccurate or out of date, there are 2 huge flaws with this approach. Number 1 is that it assumes that the author and publisher are in competition with each other. In other words, the more money the publisher makes, the worse off the author is. Number 2, it assumes that the publisher hasn't earned the money they're making. Now, if either of these assumptions is true, then that publisher does not provide adequate value to its clients and is destined to go out of business sooner rather than later. People don't buy things that are against their own self-interest. So rather than focus on how much money you make per sale, do everything you can to find a publisher who's invested in the outcome of publishing your book and their relationship with you as a client. Ideally, that would involve a relationship that lasts many years and multiple titles because you're both making money from selling tons of books. You don't want your publisher to go out of business. You want them to be there to support you in your career as an author for as long as you need and value that support. If you don't need and value that support, then don't work with them. Now, keep in mind that if a publisher publishes anything that comes their way and works on dozens or even hundreds of projects simultaneously, they can't possibly give you or your book the attention you deserve when it comes to helping make your project a success. Wheatmark, for example, makes about 70% of our revenue from book sales and about 25% from service sales. So that's just an example, but you can ask every company you're talking to about what their figures are. Now, we hear this complaint all the time from authors who've been persuaded by low price offerings and high-pressure salespeople to publish with a company that ultimately abuses them and their work. These are some of the saddest stories around because of what could have been, and now that opportunity is lost. That book is already published, and it's already screwed up. Now remember, if you publish a bad book, you're not going to make any sales, so your royalty percentage becomes meaningless. 100% of nothing is nothing. And this is something that is lost on a lot of people. If you publish a bad book, you ain't going to sell any, and then you're not going to make any royalties. So just keep that in mind. You got to publish a high quality book to begin with. All right. Critical mistake number 6 is choosing a publishing service based on the author's price for books. This is a popular target of criticism from self-publishing industry gurus. Mainly, they argue that companies shouldn't make a profit or, quote, too much profit from the books they sell to their clients. But the only way a publisher should make little or no money from the sales of your books is when they don't provide a distribution service for you. If that's the case, then they should simply design your book files and hand them over to you so that you can manage printing and fulfillment yourself. That way, you keep all the profit because you do all the work. Simple as that. Now, here's a quick insider tip, though. In nearly all cases where a publishing service claims that they don't make any profit on the sale of your book, they own the printing company that prints your book, and that's how they make their profit. Don't be fooled by their supposed benevolence. All right, number 7. Choosing a publishing service because they're the biggest. This is the 7th critical mistake. Many people prefer to do business with the biggest company they can find in the category because they figure the biggest must be the best. But this is very poor reasoning when it comes to choosing a publishing service. It's true that big companies like the Author Solutions brands AuthorHouse, iUniverse, Trafford Publishing, and Ex Libris have economies of scale and access to venture capital, so they're sometimes able to offer products and services to the public for less money than their smaller competitors. But low prices are pretty much the only advantage the big companies have to offer their authors. Again, as we noted in critical mistake number 5 a little bit earlier, a publisher that works on dozens or even hundreds of projects simultaneously can't possibly give you or your book the attention you need when it comes to helping make your publishing project a sales success. So, for example, the Author Solutions companies publish tens of thousands of titles a year, more than Random House, the United States' largest commercial trade publisher. What does Author Solutions know that Random House doesn't? Of course, they don't know anything about that. Again, as noted by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, the vast majority of books published by these giant author mills sell 200 copies at the most, even though these companies have teams of people performing marketing services for authors. It doesn't make any sense. Think about that. They have all these people doing marketing services, but the books aren't selling. That should tell you all you need to know. The above sales figures tell the real story. The big publishing services companies are in business to sell publishing and book marketing services to authors. Period. Now, we're sure that the employees at these big companies are very nice, and we know they mean well, but they don't have a clue about what works and what doesn't when it comes to selling books. In the best case scenario, what you'll get when working one of the big publishing services companies is a decent quality book published at a fairly affordable price. This is great for a memoir or other personal project, but in most cases, totally inadequate for a commercial project that will help lay the foundation for a lasting career as an author. All right, number 8, choosing a publishing service that doesn't provide wholesaling. If you publish your book with a publishing services company that doesn't offer wholesaling, which means they're essentially a glorified printer, you will be selling books out of the trunk of your car. Now, this isn't in itself a bad thing. Many speakers and other professionals, for example, sell books in the back of the room when they speak or give presentations. They obviously need to have a supply of books on hand at all times. However, there's really no reason why these sorts of professional authors shouldn't also have their books for sale on Amazon and other online booksellers too. It's a great way to grow your audience, and it's basically free online advertising for your business on one of the web's most trusted sources of information, which is Amazon.com. In fact, people will usually buy your book from these online booksellers, so in effect, they'll be paying you to read your advertising. For any other kind of author, though, the benefits of wholesaling should be clear, unless you really, really like driving. All right, number 9 is publishing a book that doesn't meet bookselling industry standards of quality. Now, if your stated goal is to publish a book that competes in the marketplace with any other book in its category, then you're in for a rough time if you make this mistake. Industry standards of quality include professional cover and interior design, editing, and even physical book quality. If you fail to meet at least the minimum standards, your project will fail. Period. Meanwhile, any company who willingly publishes a subpar book for you, after you've told them that your goal is to publish a book that competes in the marketplace, is ripping you off, simply. Here's a little nugget that will change the way you look at shopping for a publishing services company from here on out. It's about how your publishing services company operates to get new clients and new projects. If your publishing services company does not have some sort of screening process in place, they have no plans whatsoever to make money off the sales of your book. Why? Well, it's simple logic. Assuming your service provider has at least some idea about what makes a good book, factors that may include a well-defined target market, a strong title, great cover and interior design, being well written and edited, etc., they'll do everything in their power to attract good books because that, after all, is how they will make money. They'll also do everything they can to avoid working on bad books because that's a money-losing proposition for them. But if they have no plans to make money off the sales of your book, then they'll publish anything because book sales aren't critical to their bottom line. Now, we realize that this is the total opposite of pretty much all the other guides to self-publishing companies out there, which urge transparency in what they identify as author-friendly practices, such as publishing their prices on their websites. In fact, this is the exact opposite of being author-friendly. By publishing anything that comes their way, all these companies ensure is that they're going to publish a bunch of bad books by authors who take time and attention away from other more worthy projects. Furthermore, these companies create a negative publishing brand in the marketplace. Over time, allies such as your local chain or independent bookstore have learned to identify these giant publishing services companies as publishers of garbage and little more. These book-selling allies are looking to make money selling books. When they get inundated by requests from amateur authors with poor quality books for shelf space, scheduled signings, etc., it's only natural for them to create a blanket policy refusing to work with all the authors from a particular publishing services company or any publishing services company. It's up to your publisher to watch out for you and to make sure you're publishing a book that meets the standards necessary to achieve your goal. Otherwise, they're just taking your money. And on that note, this is a great time to turn to how to avoid the 3 biggest self-publishing company ripoffs. Now, most publishing services companies, or self-publishing companies as they're often called, can help you publish a well-edited, well-designed book. The problem is they frequently don't. Many companies will not be honest with you about what your project really needs to have a fair shot at being successful. But at the very least, it's nice to know that most companies are capable of helping you create a decent quality book. However, there are 3 practices that are so outrageous that they make even the world's sleaziest car salesman blush, or in this case, the guy selling you pocket watches on the corner. One involves the publishing rights to your book, the second has to do with your book's quality, and the last has to do with its marketing. The other thing that's outrageous is that all 3 of these shady practices are pretty common in the publishing services industry. Even if you ignore all the other advice in this presentation, avoid these 3 self-publishing company ripoffs like the plague. Ripoff number 1 is giving up any of your publishing rights for any period of time. This one is so obvious, and yet it's a chronic problem in the publishing services industry. An author hires a publishing service company to publish his book for him, but signs away the exclusive publishing rights to his work in all formats and all languages for a certain number of years. This is crazy and could have easily been avoided by simply reading the company's publishing agreement more carefully. Here's the rule of thumb. When you hire someone to publish your book for you, you should retain all publishing rights, period. The publishing services company is performing services for hire for you, not licensing the exclusive publishing rights to your content. In fact, if they are in fact licensing the exclusive publishing rights to your content, they should be paying you, not the other way around. In addition, sometimes a publishing service will tie up the deal you try to make later with a rights licensing publisher, either siphoning money off of your deal or delaying your new publisher's ability to bring your work to market. This is very sneaky and underhanded, as the odds are that you were the primary force driving the marketing behind your book. That's what we've been talking about this whole conversation. It was your efforts that led this new publisher to be interested in licensing the exclusive publishing rights to your work, not the efforts of your publishing service. Failing to acknowledge this fact is a shameless money grab. Ultimately, what you're looking for in a publishing services agreement is to grant your publishing services company the non-exclusive right to publish your work for as long as you want. You should be able to cancel your publishing agreement at any time for any reason without any penalty whatsoever. Ideally, you should also be able to take the production files of your book with you to your own publishing company or another publisher. Though in the case of some publishing services companies, the work may not be good enough to warrant taking with you. I hate to say it. Now, for more on publishing services companies' contracts, check out Mark Levine's excellent book on the subject, The Fine Print of Self-Publishing. Okay, now ripoff number 2 is hiring a self-publishing company to help you publish a bad book. A quick glance at the online bookstore of just about every self-publishing company out there proves, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that they couldn't care less about your book selling 10 copies, much less 10,000. Why? Well, everything from the lack of standards in what they'll publish to the retail prices of their authors' books. The vast majority of books produced by publishing services companies are of poor editorial and design quality. On top of that, they're incorrectly priced for the markets they're designed to sell into, or they're supposed to sell into. These books have no chance of ever being successful. They were destined for obscurity the day they were published. Now, in most cases, the author vastly overestimated what could be accomplished with a small or non-existent budget for publishing. And in most cases, her publishing service did little to dispel her incorrect beliefs. They were happy to simply collect her $500 and call it a day. The truth is, when you work with a publishing service to publish your book, you're essentially starting your own business. The product that you sell is copies of your book. You've got to have a great product if you want to be successful. That's just common sense. But most publishing services companies don't even ask to see your manuscript when you inquire about working with them. All they do is tell you about their various packages, quote their prices, and tell you how great their services are before offering them to you at a huge discount because they know that no one in their right mind would pay full price. If your publishing service doesn't interview you about your goals for your publishing project and doesn't request to see your manuscript or at least a sample of your manuscript before they offer to publish your book, they don't expect you to ever sell a single copy. Their business model is based on selling publishing and marketing services to authors, not on selling books. What do they care if they publish a bad book? It's on to the next author. All right, number 3. Rip-off number 3, and this is the biggest one of all, I think. Buying book marketing services from most self-publishing companies. Success in any small business boils down to understanding and then applying effective marketing principles. The same is true with your book project. It is all about the marketing. So why not hire your publishing services company to market your book for you? After all, they probably know more about book marketing than you do, right? Wrong. It's easy to see from the services they offer that most publishing services companies either don't have a clue about how to actually sell books or they're simply content to rip their clients off. You'd think that after these companies helped their authors publish poor quality, overpriced books and made a profit doing so, they'd be satisfied, right? Not even close. As soon as they finish publishing a bad book, these same publishing services companies get their commissioned salespeople back on the phones to sell wet behind the ears authors some truly atrocious marketing services. We're talking about services that don't have a snowball's chance in Hades of helping authors achieve their goal of selling more books. Wheatmark even has a litmus test for judging if a publishing services company has its authors' best interests at heart when it sells them a marketing service. And we call this the press release test. Nearly all of the self-publishing companies out there sell a generic press release service to their authors. It usually involves having someone write a press release and blasting it out to 1,000 or 100,000 or 1 million email addresses and fax numbers. Sounds great, right? Think of all those people who are getting exposed to the news of your book's publication. Except for the blatantly obvious problem. Publishing a book is not news. The day you publish your book, you'll feel like $1,000,000. You'll feel like you've scaled Everest. And if you've published a great book, to a certain extent you have. You've accomplished something that most people only dream of accomplishing in their lifetime. Unfortunately, proof of that same achievement is available 8 million other times on Amazon. And that's just on Amazon alone. That's how many unique titles are there, approximately today. And the list grows longer and longer every day. Publishing a book is not news. Nobody cares that you published a book except your friends and family. Everybody else out there is listening to radio station WIIFM, as Zig Ziglar calls it, which stands for What's in It for Me. If you want to connect with your book's readers, you're going to need to figure out how to get the marketing message in front of them that's all about them, not all about you, which is what a press release announcing the publication of your book is about. That's where the vanity in vanity publishing comes in, thinking only about yourself and not thinking about your audience. Now, don't get me wrong, a press release can be very effective so long as it's about something that actually qualifies as news. For instance, a release you send your local paper's food section announcing the tapas making workshop you'll be holding at a local Spanish restaurant, where you also share never-before-revealed Catalonian cooking tips from your newly published cookbook. See how that works? That's the kind of news the media is looking for, information the paper's readers will actually be interested in learning about. That would go in the food section, of course. Don't be a victim of your own ego or your publishing services company's come-ons. Educate yourself about effective marketing first. If you take the time to properly educate yourself about effective book marketing, you'll learn what's really possible to accomplish. Then hire someone to help you out if you must. But marketing your book doesn't have to take a lot of money, but it will always take an investment of time and effort. And of course, be sure to explore the Authors Academy, Wheatmark's training program for helping authors employ effective book marketing. You can learn more about the Authors Academy by visiting www.authorsacademy.com. Okay, now we have gone over just a ton of information today, and I'm sure that people are probably running out of steam here. But I want to just, as I promised, I want to make a 100% guaranteed, no risk, irresistible offer to our audience today. If you've come this far in this presentation, you've invested the necessary time to educate yourself about choosing a professional publishing service that will help you properly publish your book. You are honestly way, way, way ahead of 99% of authors out there looking to publish their books this year. And as a reward for your time investment, we'd like to offer you the opportunity to test drive Wheatmark's award-winning publishing services, and at a little discount to sweeten the deal. We know you've got options when choosing a publishing services provider, so we're prepared to get your business the old-fashioned way by earning it. How will we do that? By providing you with a little try-before-you-buy service that's going to be an enormous help to you. Now, over the last decade of helping authors publish high-quality books, we found that most authors just getting started on the publishing process are looking for help in one or more of the following areas of their book projects: understanding and targeting the market for their books, getting feedback from a professional editor, and getting an eye-catching cover designed. Now, Weedmark has proven solutions for each one of these tough challenges, and now you've got an opportunity to sample one or more of them risk-free. So let's take a closer look at each one. Getting expert help with clarifying your book's market. Each year, hundreds if not thousands of high-quality titles slip through the cracks of the published consciousness. These are titles that could inform, enlighten, and entertain if only they could find their audience, but they never do. Why? Most of the time, it's because the author or publisher didn't do enough research into the book's market before publishing it. The importance of understanding your book's market cannot be underestimated. Your book's title, cover design, retail price, and even its format, hardcover, paperback, or ebook, have an enormous impact when it comes to generating sales from your target audience. Our marketing experts have deep experience researching the market for books. Your 5-page Weedmark positioning analysis will include detailed, specific information about the niche or audience your book will sell into, along with critical information about the titles in your competitive network. And your competitive network is essentially your competitors. You'll learn how to position or differentiate your book to this market, even while you capitalize on the work of the authors of the other titles in your niche are doing. This information will help you to select the most effective title, subtitle, trim size, and even cover price for your book. Using this data, you'll be able to create a complete value proposition for your book that will make it irresistible to buyers. Now, the second thing that folks need help with a lot is getting expert feedback on your manuscript. In addition to understanding the market for your book, you need to discover the answer to another equally critical question. How will my market respond to my book once it's published? Now, this is a question of quality, presenting a reading experience that your target audience will love. To achieve this, New York trade publishers such as Random House or Vintage use any number of editors to fine-tune their writers' work. The next step for you then should be no different than that of an author at a trade publisher. It's time to have your work reviewed by an experienced professional editor. Now, this is your point of entry into the world of publishing, the point where you have the quality of your writing assessed. The Weedmark editorial analysis provides a thorough evaluation of your unpublished manuscript. A senior level editor will assess your manuscript to determine the level of editing needed to conform to today's standard publishing guidelines. The 10 to 15 page checklist provides feedback and recommendations on the overall text, audience and tone, English usage, grammar, spelling, punctuation, content, ambiguities, text flow problems, formatting issues, reference errors, potential permissions issues, and other editorial notes. The analysis uses a 10-point scale to score your manuscript on these editorial issues, and also includes a 4-page sample edit to illustrate exactly how the prescribed level of edit would affect your writing. Now, mind you, the purpose of the editorial analysis isn't simply to have someone say, "This is a good book," or "I like it." Many people can provide you with this sort of feedback: your family and friends, or people you know who enjoy reading the type of book you've written. The value of the Weedmark editorial analysis is that it advises you on how to produce the best, most professional book possible. The kind of book that, once readers pick it up, they can't help but rave about to all their friends. That's what's going to turn your book into a publishing success. Okay, and the third thing that folks need help with a lot is getting expert assistance with your book's cover design. It may be a cliche, but it's true. People judge a book by its cover. In fact, your book's cover may be the single most important piece of marketing collateral you'll create or have created for you during your book publishing project. Cover design can be a controversial topic, though, and for good reason. It's really more of an art than a science. There is a great deal of subjectivity involved. That said, at Weedmark we come across self-published books that look like they were designed by amateurs all the time. They're easy to spot because they don't look anything at all like the books you find at your local independent or chain bookstore. And because they don't pass a simple sight test, nobody buys them. Whether your readers discover your book in a bookstore or find it browsing on a website, the first thing they're going to see is your book's cover. And if your book's cover doesn't impress them, they won't explore it any further. On the other hand, if they really like your book's cover, they may decide to buy your book right there, on the basis of its cover alone. That's why big trade publishers will often design cover mock-ups for a book even before it's been written, much less published. So when Weedmark designs a book cover for one of our clients, the first thing we do is brainstorm ideas with the author. Then, just like the trade publishers, our designers create 2 sample book covers. We share these cover ideas with our client, who selects one of the 2. This cover mock-up becomes the basis of the design in which we'll invest multiple hours to create the final book cover, the kind of cover that will help sell a ton of books. Now, regardless of which of those services you choose to work on with us first, or all 3, the risk is entirely ours. You can feel confident knowing that the risk at the beginning of our budding relationship is all on our side. We are asking you to go on a date here, not get married. And go with me on this metaphor for a minute. I promise it applies. Publishing a book is a very personal project. This is something you've been working on for months, if not years, and you want to see it brought into the world properly. The right publishing partner can help you do just that. The wrong publishing partner can ruin your prospects for a successful career as an author, just like choosing the wrong mate can ruin your prospects for a successful life. That's why each of our try before you buy services is backed by our unconditional, no wiggle room, risk-free money-back guarantee. If you're not absolutely thrilled with the quality of the work we produce for you with one of these try before you buy services, simply let us know and we'll refund 100% of your modest investment. No conditions, no wiggling, no ifs, ands, or buts, 100% of your money back. Now, I'll tell you what, if anybody is interested on the call, first let me just very quickly give you an unsolicited comment from our client. We didn't ask this person to provide us with this information. They said it without asking. I have now published 2 new novels with Wheatmark in addition to reissuing my Battle of Britain novel under a new title and with a new cover in Kindle format. I've been very, very pleased with the professionalism and support Wheatmark provides, including the Authors Academy. And then I highlighted this part myself. The first new novel I published with Wheatmark has sold 5 times as well as my previously published novels. And this is from Helena Schrader, author of 16 books, including the Leonidas of Sparta trilogy. The 3rd one is about to come out pretty soon. And again, that's not something we asked her to say, that was something she said unprompted. So if you're ready to begin your own journey to publishing success, simply enter this URL in your browser window. That's www.wheatmark.com/special offer. And that's all one word. Again, it's www.wheatmark.com/special offer, or call us at 888-934-0888, option 2, and we'll be happy to chat with you about your specific project. Now, I want to go back and just let people know that I'm going to answer some questions live here for a few minutes. I've got some questions that people have typed in during the call. I want to make sure to look at all those questions and answer the ones that are appropriate. But I also want to mention for folks on the call, if you have additional questions, go ahead and email me at my personal email address, which is gnorton@wheatmark.com. Or, of course, you can just call us at 888-934-0888, option 2. So thanks, everybody, so much for joining us today on today's call. I am going to start taking questions now, but if you don't have any questions, go ahead and click on that link if you're interested. So I'm going to go back now and get back to this, to some of these questions. Thanks again, everybody, for attending. Okay, so Sean from, this is going quickly. Questions are pouring in. Okay, so Sean says you recommended skipping the obtain an agent step, but is it practical to self-publish, build a track record, and then seek representation? What are the sales plateaus that might attract an agent? So it's a great question, Sean. And as I said during the call, if you can sell 10,000 copies in a year, you're often going to be in the running for interesting someone in your book. Now, the drawback is this. If that person checks out your platform and says, whoa, you've sold 10,000 copies to the only 10,000 people in the world who want to buy this book, then they probably won't buy your book. So I know it's tricky. If you can sell 10,000 copies, it's good, but the publisher might also think that's the end of your market. But if you sold 10,000 copies, what you should have by now is 10,000 customers. So what do you care if they pick you up? You can go back and ask your 10,000 people, hey, what else do you guys want? And then publish that book if the publisher is not smart enough to see that. So, here we go now with our next question. A good publisher gets you in places like Barnes & Noble. What is wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with going after the physical bookstore market, but it's really not the only game in town. And for independent and self-publishing authors, Josie, it's not necessarily an easy market to tap because that game is played by 6 or 7 companies who essentially have a monopoly on that sales channel. And if you get deeper into this game, you're going to see that working in physical bookstores is often quite challenging. So my advice for most people when they're starting out is target places like Amazon or maybe special events or speaking. And once you've done a good job with getting those sales, physical bookstores will be much more interested then. And so you'll probably have to take a lot less financial risk than what you were looking at when you first get started. It's very hard to crack those markets effectively when you just get started. So thanks so much for the question, Josie. Larry says, you're the best. Thank you, Larry. You are also the best. I appreciate your comment. Jeff from Arizona says, what is the best way for a new author to get their book published? So that, there's lots of questions pouring in. And I'm losing a little track of where I was. Okay. Let's see here. So this is a great question, Jeff. What is the best way for a new author to get their book published so that the author can get his book to marketplace and, of course, make a reasonable profit? Again, it really depends. I'd say that for most people, if you're a new author, you either want to self-publish, which means forming your own publishing company, or work with a reliable publishing service. And the reason I say that is because it could take you 2 years to get an agent, and most of the time that's a very frustrating process. And what happens if you never what happens if you never get it done? Then you've missed out on an opportunity to get your work in front of people and actually start building your audience. So I say, the best way to do it is either self-publish or work with a publishing service. Now, Susan from Belafonte says, do you have to launch an ebook? I would say that it is certainly tipped to a certain extent if you are an author of fiction, so you tell stories. Doing an ebook is a really good idea because people with those Kindles, they just love to buy fiction. And one of the neat things as an independent author is that you actually have an opportunity to undercut the competition by selling a book for less, like say $2.99 or even 99 cents, than books published by trade publishers. So you have a temporary pricing advantage. So I think you have a really good opportunity if you write fiction to launch ebooks. If you're writing nonfiction, then I think it's a little less important that you publish an ebook, but it's still a pretty good idea because ebook sales are really taking off. People are, really buying a lot more ebooks now in nonfiction formats as well. So I would definitely consider doing ebooks very seriously. And for many people, I also mentioned you might even consider doing an ebook first, and then, coming back and doing a print book later. That's a really good way to do it. You test the market with ebook, you're saving a lot of money from printing, or even using print-on-demand technology can really significantly lower your cost. But don't forget, you got to make sure you invest enough to make it a good ebook. That's so key. I cannot stress that enough. And any publishing professional in the publishing industry will tell you that if they know their business. All right, now let's see. Gar asks, will legitimate book publicists represent a self-published book author? The answer is absolutely. But again, you can really make a lot of progress in your project if you study marketing before you contact a publicist. What happens is a lot of times people say, well, I'm going to go hire this book publicist, who represents authors of all stripes, but they don't understand enough about the market for their book. So basically they're asking their publicist to do everything. Their publicist is supposed to understand, how to get a book into a place where people find out about it. If you don't know anything about where your book's market is, a publicist can't help you because you're going to spend thousands of dollars for them to figure it out. You want to do your homework first. Create a marketing plan for your book, then contact a publicist if you feel like you need help. Don't rely on vendors to do all the work for you because they basically can't. It's really up to you to understand who your book is for. So that's what I recommend in terms of a book publicist representing a self-published book and author. Now, Roger from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada says, will your service help me to conduct a marketing campaign designed to make me an Amazon bestseller? The answer is no. In the Authors Academy, we can teach you how to do a Amazon bestsellers campaign, but we always work with partners who we trust, who we don't get paid a commission, to do this kind of marketing activity, because it's important to us that we refer you to people who really know what they're doing, and most importantly, that you understand what you're buying before you do it. So it's a great question, but if you like, go ahead and send me an email, and I'll see if I can put you in touch with someone who does Amazon bestseller campaigns. But remember, if you don't have a good book, you're going to be wasting your time. If it's not a top quality book, you can't artificially make it sell. You've got to invest in the proper book. John Lewis from Scottsdale says, how many health and fitness titles has Wheatmark represented, and what would be your recommendation for someone completing work in this genre? John, that's a great question. Wheatmark's a publishing service, so we're not representing any of our titles. We are publishing books under a non-exclusive agreement. Basically, we've done a fair number of health and fitness titles, and we've got a number of health and fitness titles that are in our Great Expectations program, which are books that have sold between 2,000, 5,000, or maybe even more than 10,000 copies. So my recommendation for you, though, you're publishing nonfiction. If you don't want to start your own company, then absolutely working with a publishing service is going to be a better way to go, because you're going to be able to get your work out on the market. Health and fitness is always a very popular, but something that is popular like that. The only problem with it is that positioning is really important because there's a lot of competition. So make sure you really have nailed your market down and how you plan to market your specific health and fitness title to your niche before you get involved in the publishing process, because afterwards it's too late. So you've got to do this planning and this marketing plan in advance. Okay, now Sean asks another question. He says, I'd be interested to know what Wheatmark's screening process is for their authors. Sean, that's a great question, because we do have a screening process. The way this happens most frequently is people will contact me and they'll say, hey, I've got a book that I'm working on. I'll say, great, what's your book about? And then I ask them other questions like, what are your goals for this project? And then probably most importantly, who are you? Are you a professional who's publishing a book in your area of expertise? Are you a first-time novelist? Are you a children's book author? Are you a poet? I'm trying to find out what kind of person I'm working with, and I'm also trying to figure out how serious they are about their project. If they're very serious about their project and they have a good book, of course I have to look at the manuscript before I know, and trust me, people, I can tell really quickly. I've worked at Random House, I've worked in editorial my whole life. It's very easy to tell a book that's ready for market versus a book that isn't. If it isn't, that's fine, but you really then want to work with a professional editor. And as I mentioned, the service we offer to our clients is an editorial analysis, so they can check out what an editor would want to do with their book and make sure that they're okay with that. Because ultimately, we do have a different relationship with our clients than a trade publisher. We are a service provider. So we perceive our goal and our value is to offer the best advice, the best marketing information, and the highest quality service we can to give our authors a fighting chance in a very competitive marketing place. But I'll tell you, I can look at something and I know right away if it's got no chance. And it doesn't mean that the author should give up or retire. It just means, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of competition. And I believe that it would be unfair of me to tell someone, hey, you should buy all these services from us, if it's a waste of time. If there's no chance of them having a commercial project, and for us, it's a waste of time because we know they're not going to sell any books, no matter how much work goes into the book. We don't say like, oh, we reject 50, 80%, 90% of projects, because that's not really what we're in. We're not into rejecting people. We're into basically helping them figure out how to move forward with their project successfully. In most cases, that means I spend most of my time looking at projects that are not right for us and that I refer to another company. Sometimes an agent, or telling people they should get an agent, or maybe CreateSpace because they have no money, no budget for publishing. And truth be told, they're probably not going to sell a lot of books, but if they just want to get it published, hey, don't let anything stop you from doing it. You don't have to have money to publish today. Get done what you want to get done. But if you want to have a successfully commercial project, you need to work with professionals who are trained in understanding what a professional book is, what it isn't, and more than anything, understand marketing. This is publishing these days. Successful publishing is a marketing challenge, not a publishing challenge. So, Sean, that's the answer to our question. Our screening process is a combination of an interview and looking at the manuscript. Just a quick thing that I'll answer just in case people are wondering. if you want to buy any of these introductory services from us, some people say like, oh, well, then you don't have to show me your manuscript. Well, really, in most cases, I'll look at the manuscript before someone will buy one of those services. But those services are designed to help anybody, regardless of how they're going to publish. Maybe they're going to publish with a trade publisher, so they need to find an agent. Well, in order to find an agent, they need to have the best manuscript possible, so they should do that editorial analysis before they go hunting. Maybe they need cover design work. They need to, work with cover designers to get ideas on paper for what their book cover is going to look like. Positioning is something you can do with a book's title. You don't even have to have a manuscript to do book positioning. As I was talking about, trade publishers will come up with a title and a book cover before they even write the book. Before they even write the book, they will do this work. So these things are not necessarily only for people who have complete manuscripts. These are things that you can do during the process of writing or sometime after. Now, the one exception is that I would say, you don't want to do an editorial analysis until you've got 85 to 90% of your manuscript complete. Otherwise, you don't really have enough for an editor to work with. Craig says, great presentation. Thank you, Craig. But I prefer to see the presenter. Okay, gotcha. So the picture is not enough. Greg wants the live image. So I got you, Craig. We'll work on that for next time. And when we do the Authors Academy calls, we usually do live face. Just for this presentation today, we weren't able to. Okay, we've got more comments about that. Rosemarie says, hi, I have missed more than half of the show. Can I hear it at a later time? I know that there's a lot of people that wanted to see this call today, Rosemarie, and they weren't all able to make it. So we're thinking about doing an encore presentation real soon. We will send everybody information about that. Okay, so people are saying thanks for the meeting and info. Lots of great ideas and motivation for further learning and action. Thanks, and thanks for keeping me on your mail list. Jason, we're happy to. We'll keep providing you with that high quality information. John says, thank you, Mr. Norton. This was very helpful. John, thank you for attending. I appreciate it. Let's see here. I've got a few more questions I just want to go over real quick, and then we will wrap up for today. Josie says that working on a diet book with lots of pictures is what they're doing, but they're wondering about an ebook photo online. Can they be viewed? Yeah, basically, if I understand your question correctly, a lot of times people, when they're doing color projects, you do want to think about maybe doing an ebook, because color printing on the interior of a book is very expensive, regardless of how you print the book, whether it's using print-on-demand technology or doing maybe an offset print run. So, company I've heard of, like there's Blurb, which is a blurb.com. They specialize in doing photography books. I don't know if they do ebooks. A company I like that does ebooks that might be able to help you is bookbaby.com. I like them a lot. They're very kind of hands-off, do-it-yourself type situation. But for color kinds of books like this, it might be a good idea. Okay, how does a book of poetry go on an ebook? Ruth, it works out great. You can design ebooks now to have poetry. Again, this is not something Wheatmark would work on, just because there's not really much of a commercial market for poetry. But I absolutely encourage you to go out there and work on it. You might check out Smashwords. Smashwords has got another way to publish ebooks. So Robert says, there's most of this discussion is on books that are mostly text, fiction or nonfiction. What about publishing coffee table type illustrated books? My subject would be a heavily illustrated art history. Robert, this is going to be an expensive project. It's definitely something that you might take a look at Blurb for. And in many cases, you're really going to have to do a print run because of the price of each book. If you do like a hardcover, full color coffee table book that's beautiful. There are some companies out there that do this project. I don't have any off the top of my head to recommend, just because it's not something we work on very much. But I just encourage you to go out there and do a little bit more research in finding them. You don't want to use print-on-demand technology for that in most cases, because it's going to be too expensive. Susan Walk says, do you need an agent in order to get published? Susan, no, you don't need an agent to get published. You need an agent to get published by Random House or other trade publishers. But these days, there are tons of people getting published, either self-publishing or working with, a publishing service. So, okay, everyone. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody so much for attending today's call. This was a lot of fun. I know there's a lot of information we went over. There's some more questions that came in, but we're just out of time for today. And so I'm going to go ahead and email back the people who asked questions and make sure to get your questions answered. But thanks everybody so much for attending today, and we will talk to you soon.